Hello there. Today I'm delighted to be trying a wine from Alsace, from the wonderful Domaine Marcel Deiss. This is the 2017 Spring, and it's a Muscat, or Muscat if I'm pronouncing it properly in French. The Deiss family trace their history back to 1744 in terms of winemaking. But it's not actually until 1947, over 200 years later, that the domain in its current form is started, as Marcel Deiss, returning from the Second World War to his native Bergheim, sets up the domain. Today they have 32 hectares of vines, and the estate is run by his grandson Jean-Michel, with his son Mathieu assisting him. For Marcel Deiss, I suppose a real turning point was when he inherited on an old vineyard's deathbed a portion of the Schoenenbourg Grand Cru. And upon taking over this vineyard, he found that there were 33 different grape varieties planted there, not just the 13 noble grape varieties from Alsace, but all interplanted together, 33 different grape varieties. And he came to realise quite quickly from working with them that actually the terroir of the site wasn't necessarily expressed by varieties. He came to believe that the terroir was expressed even when you blended all the varieties together. So he would follow an old practice of this complantation, but what the Americans would call a field blend, where all the varieties were picked at the same time and vinified together. So not picking blocks and then blending them subsequently once the wines have been made, but co-fermenting everything together. And he was so passionate about this that Marcel managed to convince the INAO, the wine regulation authorities, that he could produce blended wines, and they dropped the requirement for AOC Alsace and Alsace Grand Cru wines to state the variety on the label, enabling him to make and market these wines. The other area in which Marcel was influential was his decision to convert to biodynamics. I think it's quite noticeable that on the label here it says vigneron artisan, hashtag vigneron artisan, and to a large extent that was Marcel's approach. So, very passionate about biodynamics. His entire vineyard had been converted by 1998. With this idea of sort of enhancing your terroir by making sure all your operations are in harmony with the natural world and its rhythms. In the cellars, his approach has been low intervention. His wines are made with the indigenous yeasts that come in as the microflora on the fruit into the winery and commence the fermentations that way. There's as little treatment as possible. A wine like this is not going to undergo malolactic conversion just to preserve its beautiful sort of freshness. This particular wine spends a year aging with its yeast lees. I should have said all hand-picked, of course. I think it sort of goes without saying almost. So yes, a wine that's very carefully handled, to try and ensure that the beauty of high quality fruit makes its way through into the wine. So let's have a look at it, shall we? 2017, I was a little concerned that this might have been a little old for Muscat, which when made in this sort of dry Alsace style is often quite a sort of a fragile, delicate wine. But so the colour, it's a medium lemon yellow. There's almost a sort of greenish hint. It's quite a medium to dark. There's quite an intensity of colour actually. When I swirl, there's not a particular propensity to form tears there. The wine is 12.5% alcohol, so that's what you'd expect, I guess. So let's have a look at the aromas, shall we? Gosh, smelling those, the thing that it makes me think of first is a sort of quite a high-toned, very ripe pear. There are notes of ripe pear, apple, quince coming through again, and some of that I think is almost a textural element to the aroma, if that makes any sense. But there are these lifted notes. I suppose one might sort of suggest slightly cidery. I think they are related to fermentation aromas, and I think they're related maybe to slight oxidation, which would follow on the colour, but it doesn't seem unbalanced. So let's see what it's like on the palate, shall we? Gosh, well, that's a huge surprise, because there's such a wonderful richness on the front palate that I'm still unsure as to whether that actually has any sweetness or not. From the fact that I'm not particularly detecting sugar on the tip of my tongue, I don't think there is a particularly high sweetness in that. But there's such lovely richness. There's a honeyed note, there's a lovely intense, maybe slightly caramelised note to the fruit. Very sort of luscious, sweet pear, when a pear sort of becomes very very soft and easy to bite in, and very juicy. Those sort of slightly overripe, slightly I suppose honeysuckle perfumes, those sort of slightly sickly, overblown notes, but actually working really beautifully. Sorry, it's not the nicest way of describing it, but perhaps a little unfair to it, but it's that sort of slightly sweetish perfume that yeah, is fascinating. So there's this real richness and an intensity of fruit right at the front of the palate. The acidity is balanced, sufficient that there's some quite nice length there. Again, that sort of pear and quince note is carrying on throughout the wine. It's not particularly sharp. I'm not particularly salivating on that. I guess one of the things about me likening it to pear and quince is perhaps there's a little bit of a slightly grainy texture to the wine, giving it a little bit of body. It's not a heavyweight wine, but it's certainly that richness of fruit is making it sort of mouth-filling, medium-bodied. And as I say, the flavours are lasting reasonably well. So that was a really interesting wine, actually. So Marcel Deiss, or Domaine Marcel Deiss, Spring 2017. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you find this interesting. Do please follow our channel. Do also like and share and leave your comments below. But I really hope you'll join us again soon. Bye now.